very pleased to be joined this morning by Amy Gallagher. Amy is a registered mental health nurse, and she was studying forensic psychotherapy at the Tavistock and Portland NHS Trust. She's now suing the trust for discrimination against her beliefs. She's a Christian, and against essentially her skin colour, because she seems to be the wrong colour as well. This has been reported in the mainstream media. We covered this a few days ago on the UK Column News, and it's a case that illustrates the movement of woke ideology, the march of woke ideology through our institutions, in this case the NHS, and NHS training and staff training, and the belief system that the NHS is inculcating into those who care for us. So it's a very important story. Amy, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to just to set the scene briefly. You were studying at Tavistock and Portman Trust. Just tell us a little bit about the course you were on and what your studies involved.
So just to explain, I'm a mental health nurse. I'd already done 2 years at the Tavistock and Portman. I did an initial postgraduate diploma in psychotherapy, and then I returned to do my final 2 years in forensic psychotherapy. It takes 4 years of training to become a psychotherapist, so I was kind of halfway through and there to complete my final 2 years, which involves clinical work and attending seminars and lectures and so on and so forth. So that was in 2020 when I enrolled for the first 2 years. Yeah.
What was the first moment where you realised something might be wrong here? I'm not very comfortable with how what I'm being asked to believe or what information's being presented. What was the first moment you thought, well, we could have an issue?
Yeah, so the first moment was quite soon into the course when I was required to attend a lecture on race and racism, which is an important topic, especially in psychology. And I was quite interested to find out kind of the psychological theories and understandings of race and racism. But the lecture itself was very different from what I expected. So it was very, very political. So it was talking about Black Lives Matter and that the media was racist in its treatment of Meghan Markle, and it was quoting theorists like Ibram X. Kendi and Ta-Nehisi Coates, who aren't psychologists. They're actually critical race theorists, which is a very kind of radical, divisive ideology. And it didn't seem to have that much reference to psychotherapy. And there was also this kind of thread throughout the lecture of being quite anti-Christian. So it was talking about the impact of the transatlantic slave trade, and it was linking it repeatedly to Christianity. So at the end of this lecture, I sort of said, I've noticed that you've singled out Christianity and spoke about it in a negative way, and I'm curious about why that is. And the lecturer said, well, we do see Christianity as being racist because it's European. And I didn't say much in response to that. I just explained that I thought that the lecture was highly political and quite biased. So that happened, and I just thought maybe that's just a one-off. I'm not too thrilled about it, but I didn't say anything further. And then 3 days after that, I got sent an email with a link to a lecture that was titled "Whiteness: A Problem for Our Time." This was advertised as being a policy seminar for the trust, and they were advertising it quite heavily. And I looked on the website, and I saw quite very radical and what I would consider racist things. It was saying whiteness and racism are the same thing, and it spoke about that it's the job of white people to tackle racism. And then I watched the lecture because I was interested, and particularly because it was billed as part of their kind of policy. And it was just pure ideology. It was they were using phrases like white fragility, white ignorance. At one point, she said white people don't understand the world. She said all sorts of things, facing the implications of being white isn't comfortable, and it was a lot of shaming and a lot of guilt around the idea of being white, which someone who's interested in mental health, I found that to be quite concerning, because it's not a positive narrative to give people. So at that stage, I was quite shocked, and I was thinking, well, I've paid all my money into this institution, and I'm not too happy about the fact that I'm paying for this kind of stuff. It was, yeah, I found it deeply offensive, and so I responded to that lecture with an email response saying to the students, that these ideas are an ideology called critical race theory. It's actually not clinical psychology, and we need to be. I personally don't think being white is a problem, and we need to be aware that there's different viewpoints, and we will be treating patients who have different viewpoints, and that this is just one view, and it's quite a narrow view. Um, so that was my response to it.
Firstly, equating the slave trade with Christianity. I mean, this is one of the hallmarks of this ideology. Is a cherry picking of facts or alleged facts to create a narrative. The slave trade as a whole has been happening in all nations at all times, basically until 1830, when the British Empire decided to stop it. But the driver behind the move against the slave trade was, of course, Christianity.
Yes.
Especially the Methodist campaigning, active nature of the Methodist religion at the time. They were talking about getting things done and improving the world, and they wanted to eliminate the slave trade, and they did. I mean, they got parliamentary support. They got the entire slave trade outlawed in the empire, and then the West African Squadron of the Royal Navy spent decades stamping it out. But it was all actually driven by Christians, predominantly in England, campaigning to bring that situation about. They would also be white. It's the irony of the errors involved in the narrative that was presented to you are quite striking. And of course, the Muslim Arabs were hugely involved in the slave trade. The Barbary pirates were. I mean, everybody was involved in the slave trade. Jewish middlemen, you name it. It was all happening. The whole planet was involved in this, and always had been. But it was actually predominantly the Methodist Christians that turned the situation around by a determined and long-lasting principled stand against what was happening. So that's one thing. And the other issue you mentioned is this attack on whiteness and the use of these strange terms, white fragility.
White ignorance.
White ignorance. When you obviously now understand what you're dealing with there. You call it correctly what it is, critical race theory. It's a form of Marxist critical theory, which is all about criticizing the institutions of Western society relentlessly until, under the weight of the criticism, they collapse. It's about an ideological attack on the West, essentially. At the time when this first came up, how much did you understand about what you were dealing with? Did you know then what critical race theory was? Did you have the background of the Marxist ideology? Or did you have to pick it up as you went along and, what is this that I'm dealing with?
Yeah, no, so I did know a bit about it, and I recognized it quite quickly as being critical race theory. I mean, since then I've got away and I've learned a lot more about the underpinnings, and I've done a lot more reading to try and kind of get myself equipped to be able to tackle this. But no, I at the time I was aware, and I was just quite shocked. I knew that I was sort of aware of it happening in America, but I just thought, oh, that wouldn't happen here. we're a bit more sensible. We wouldn't have something like that in the NHS. So it was very shocking. I was like, oh my gosh, I was wrong.
You make a stand against this. You recognise it for what it is. Well, you're obviously struck by the attack on Christianity as being, well, even on the surface of it, extremely odd, because here you have a state-funded NHS organisation engaged in an attack on an explicit attack on Christianity, when of course Christianity, like any other form of belief, is a protected characteristic under the law in Britain. So that alone is a bit of a strange set of events. You started to push back. So what was the initial response that came back from the organisation to your what would we call it, resistance to the message?
Yeah, so the course lead sent me an email saying that we need to talk about my response to the lecture, and I got invited into a meeting with her. And she sort of said the sort of tone was that I'd sort of potentially done something wrong. And she said that given my personal views, that the course itself might not be right for me. She described the organisation as being an anti-racist organisation, which is another sort of misnomer for critical race theory, essentially. And I said, well, I'm also against racism. I said, my belief is that everybody's equal and should be treated equally, and we shouldn't judge people based on their ethnicity or race. And I always aim to try not to be prejudiced. That's the goal. What some people refer to as the sort of colourblind approach. And she said that that is now considered discredited and outdated, which was just quite an extraordinary thing to hear that being said. And I said, this lecturer put forth the view that all white people are racist, essentially. And I said, is that the view of that particular lecturer, or is that the view of the organisation more broadly? And she said, I think it would be, the view of the organisation. And she went on to say, it's a bit like the way there's an inherent sexism in all men. And I said, well, I don't agree with that either, so that doesn't really help me. And it was just sort of left as, a kind of an idea that I need to be quiet if I'm going to be able to continue on the course.
It was clear at this point that your beliefs, your viewpoints were being seen as problematic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The cultural Marxists use the same vocabulary, but they don't use the same dictionary. The words mean different things. Anti-racist is a really good example of this, because when a normal person hears anti-racist, they think it means someone who's against racism. And certainly with the Christian worldview, you would be against racism for a variety of reasons. And most worldviews, not all, but most, would agree with that position that we should be against racism. But of course, that's not what anti-racist means. The cultural Marxists define racism as discrimination based on race that decreases equity, equity being the degree to which the outcomes for people are identical, are the same. Anti-racism they define as discrimination based on race that increases equity. So in other words, when they say anti-racist, they mean being discriminatory against people because of their skin color or other ethnic characteristics, in order to produce more equal outcomes. In other words, for example, not providing medical services to, say, white people based wholly on need, but modifying that to produce outcomes more equal amongst what they would term the various races, looked at statistically across the whole of society. Right, so the anti-racism means means discriminating based on race, but for what they would term to be a noble reason. and not what you would term sort of colourblind, which is not discriminating on race. So it's a very strange world where the words don't mean what you would think they mean. I don't know if you found that aspect of it difficult as you started to resist what was being imposed, but certainly the strange modification of language and the changing of the meaning of words is a very strong characteristic of this ideology that you're facing.
It's really difficult to have a conversation when you're using different language, essentially, because you're using words and it mean what you mean by it, they mean something different. So how can you have a conversation? Essentially, that's what language is. It's a shared understanding of what a word means. So yeah, I mean, I was later, not long after that, I had a sort of report into my progress on the course, and I was told that I was doing well with my patients, but the progress board had noted that my views weren't in keeping with the trust's anti-racist thinking. So if someone says you're not anti-racist, that kind of essentially implies that you're racist, right? Which is not a very nice thing to be accused of at all. But of course, I hadn't said anything racist. In my, I would argue I'm highlighting the fact that they're being racist. So it's very difficult to have a conversation with an organisation that's where you don't have a shared language, essentially. I was saying, I'm using the dictionary definition of these words,
Just to illustrate before we move on, one more point of how the words do not mean what we would think they mean. Colourblind in social justice usage, I'm reading here from the excellent encyclopedia of social justice on the New Discourses website. It says the idea of claiming colourblindness is akin to the notion of being not racist. And as with not racist, the colourblind individual, by ostensibly failing to see race, fails to see racism and falls into racist passivity. The language of colourblindness, like the language of being not racist, is a mask to hide racism. This is the definition. If you say I don't see race in how I'm conducting myself professionally, they define that as a racist statement, as a mask to hide your racism. There is no way out of. Well, this is when it gets to be a religion, and one of the things I want to talk to you in a little while about is how religious this is in nature. It's like a far left woke version of original sin.
Yeah.
You cannot eliminate, you cannot get away. You're born white British. That's your original sin, and there's no way out of it for you. You have to spend your life working to, lessen your guilt, I suppose. Psychologically, an extremely harmful idea, I would have thought. Anyway, how did things develop from there? You had your warning put down. You were told that you had to check your thinking, and your thinking might not be compatible. What happened next?
I spoke to some people in my life. I have a close friend who is a legal advisor, and I said, surely this is against the Equalities Act because they're singling out a race and they're singling out a religion. And I said, well, I got some advice about it, and I said, what do you think I should do? So I decided to just to make a complaint, an official complaint, and see what their response was. I was sort of hoping that someone higher up would step in and say, oh gosh, no, that's wrong. We don't really mean that. So that's just a view. That's just one view, but it's fine for you to disagree. So I made a complaint, and they said they were taking it seriously, and there would be an investigation. While they was doing that, they continued to to push reading material onto me that was of similar nature. The stuff about whiteness and sort of anti-Christian rhetoric, so something about again accusing the Bible of being racist, and I just noted it and didn't say anything. And then there was a review of the term where I was asked by the course lead what I thought, how I'd found the course so far, and there was anything I didn't like or disagreed with, and I said, well, I don't like this recent reading material. It's being racist about white people, and it's singling out the Christian religion. And I've already noted that that's happened, and I've already I've already spoken about that, and it's happening still. And in response to that, she raised a student conduct policy against me. So she sent me an email saying that I'd spoken inappropriately, I'd conducted myself in a vexatious manner, and that I'd created a traumatizing environment for people. And the student conduct policy is essentially the first part of a disciplinary proceeding to sort of remove me from the course. All I'd essentially said was that these ideas aren't evidence-based, they're discriminatory, and that was it really. And she just told me to stop
So,
talking.
so you were literally silent.
Yeah,
So
literally.
you're raising a complaint against the trust for
Yeah.
discriminating against you
Mm.
was painted as inherently toxic behaviour.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And they started a disciplinary procedure against you in response.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
How senior was this person?
She was. I don't know if I necessarily want to name names, but she was in a significant position of power. She was the lead of the course. She was the head of the course.
So the head, okay, no, it's the head of the course was basically saying um, that your complaint about this policy was traumatizing, was itself behavior which was essentially pathological,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Actively harmful.
yeah. It's a misuse of psychological terminology. Essentially, it's not trauma to disagree with someone. That shouldn't be traumatizing. Anyhow, but that's what they were arguing. And then they got back to me about my initial complaint, and they essentially said that they just doubled down on the ideology. Essentially, they said that we encourage all our students to interrogate whiteness, and we see whiteness as a system of power and privilege, and our policies need to reflect that more. They'd actually realised that they needed to do more of it rather than less of it. That was their response, which was quite incredible, really.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, well, yeah, there are three rules, right? Social justice warriors always lie, social justice warriors always double down, and social
yes.
justice warriors always project. So if they
Mm,
call you a racist, it's because they're racist. If they're caught
yeah.
with a lie, they'll double down. This is usually correct. So the head of the course and the course you were on doubled
Mm,
down and was absolutely clear that we need more critical race theory, that we're absolutely committed to this ideology and there will be no turning around.
mm.
Um, did you raise this with the higher echelons of Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust? Did you take it to chief executive level? Did you take it to board level? I mean, how high did you push this to try and get an internal resolution?
There was an internal investigation where, as I said, they sort of doubled down, and I then appealed that investigation. So I said, yeah, I'm not happy with the results, and I took it as far. I took it all the way up to the CEO. Essentially, they rejected my appeal for a further internal investigation, and they just parroted the same stuff.
I was wondering, did you have any direct communication or contact with the CEO or anyone at board level?
Yeah, the CEO did. He essentially responded by saying, uh, that we are an anti-racist organisation and we take racism seriously, and we are against discrimination towards BAME, what they were called BAME people, which is Black and ethnic minorities, and we're an anti-racist organisation, and that's what they keep saying in response to me. Is when I quote things that they're saying that are racist, they just say we are an anti-racist organisation, and again it comes back to the having a different understanding of what the word means, so we
Yes,
can't get any
yes,
further than that.
yes. It comes back to the different dictionary, and it means that these two statements seem, well, they both can't be true, but actually they are. because the way they define anti-racism is, of course, racist. Right? It
Yes.
is inherently racist because it is discriminating based on race. Right?
Mm.
And what they don't tell the public is, yes, they're discriminating based on race, and they're going to continue to do it, and they think it's right that they should do this because we have to do something about whiteness.
Mm.
This is the view they have. Whiteness is the original sin. Now, the aspect of this that I was becoming kind of dimly aware of for a while, but was very crisply put by an American commentator called James Lindsay, who has the New Discourses website I mentioned earlier, who actually is not a Christian yet. He's not a Christian. He was, in fact, one of the new atheists. He was very radically anti-religion some years ago. He was part of the sort of new atheist movement, and he now finds himself allied with mostly Christians fighting against the woke ideology. And he's looked at this in some considerable depth and read all of the original texts that generated the ideology from the original philosophers, Marcuse, Derrida, all of Foucault, all of these sorts of guys. And his conclusion is it is a religion. And not only is Marxism or neo-Marxism a religion, but it sees itself as the opponent of Christianity. It sees Christianity as the thing that must be replaced in order for their ideology, their worldview to gain dominance and for them to reshape the world in the way that they wish and to destroy essentially the tenets of Western society, which include such things as the nation, the church, and the family. And as we've seen more recently, even ideas of what male and female is. All boundaries, all borders, all limitations have to be pulled apart under this ideology. They see Christianity as the great opponent, and that's why it's specifically Christianity they go after. Because if you look at the belief system of, say, Islam or Judaism, there's a substantial amount of overlap, and in many of the cases, you think, well, okay, well, you could equally go after Islam, say, but you don't. Why is that? There's a couple of reasons, but one's tactical, I think. But the other one is they see Christianity as their enemy. And that's clear in the literature. It was explicitly stated by some of their main thinkers 40, 50 years ago. It's very interesting to see it playing out in the NHS in the 21st century England. We see this actually being explicitly stated in this, the going after Christianity, it's directly in the crosshairs. This is the problem. And they're doing so in a very blatant, very bold manner, and against the background of the legislation, which makes it a protected characteristic. It's a very strange choice for an organisation to make. I mean, I'm assuming the chief executive. Who is the chief executive of Tavistock and Portman?
Paul Jenkins.
Paul Jenkins. I'm assuming Paul Jenkins has got legal advisors and is well advised on his requirements under the Equalities Act, on his duties under the Equalities Act. And against that background, I find the immediate doubling down and the apparent lack of any doubt over the line they're following surprising. there's no, what would you say, there's no moderation, there's no fence sitting. They're
Yeah.
not saying, well, we want to push this ideology, but we can't go too far because the legislation says this. There doesn't seem to be any kind of holding back. It's very full on. Critical race theory is what we believe. This is what we are going to teach, and this is what all of our students need to adopt. I mean, am I mischaracterizing it, or was it just as powerfully put as that?
No, I think that's right. It's tantamount to religion because the point that I've been making all the way through, I'm quite a liberal person in the sense that I believe, clinicians they can believe in whatever theories they want in their own time. I'm just essentially saying we need to be aware that there's different viewpoints. There needs to be a debate. If you're going to argue the case that Christianity is racist, well, firstly, I don't know why that's on a psychotherapy course, but you would also want to hear the other side of the debate. So I've just been very kind of essentially saying, look, we need to have different viewpoints. But as you say, they can't allow for any doubt. And that is, they can't allow for that other point of view because they think they've got, it's like the one true truth. It's the truth. It's not a viewpoint, it's the truth. And that is kind of like a kind of fundamentalism that you would see in very religious people.
It's cult-like.
Yes.
It's like a religious cult as opposed to a healthy religious debate. It's the fact that the opposing view must not be heard. That's
Yeah.
characteristic of cults, not more healthily functioning religious organizations.
Yeah.
Did you find any support from anywhere, either within the organization or from your fellow students? Did you get any backup and support?
Not no, not at all. I mean, there were some lecturers who I would describe as being neutral. They didn't, but nobody, no actual genuine support. Nobody came to my defence or sort of stepped in and said, this has gone too far, or yeah, it was quite extraordinary. I was on my own with it for over a year, being made to feel like there was something wrong with me. Essentially, when you've got a whole organization telling you that you're wrong, you have to sort of think, well, maybe I am, you know, because it'd be rather arrogant of me to just think, no, I'm right all the time. So it's very difficult position to be in.
On that front, right, the difficulty of the position, did they respond to that? Was there any idea that your welfare or well-being might be at risk, that you would need an advocate, you would need someone on your side, you would need someone along with you as you were facing, well, what starts to look like a tribunal of,
Yeah.
of inquiry, that that you deserve some protection through this process. Did that get recognised?
Not in a serious way. So at the very start, I did say this is having an impact on my mental health, and it's very stressful. And they didn't follow that up. I did have an email from HR sort of directing me to student support services, and I didn't take that up because I just thought I was just worried I'd get more of the same, because if the whole organisation is saying that this is our view, I don't want to go to just student support services and be told the same thing. So I didn't take that up. But other than that, yeah, their sort of care, their duty of care towards me was pretty lackluster. It didn't really exist, and I was having to go to all these meetings and disciplinary meetings, and they wasn't really asking me, are you okay? How are you? Um,
Can you describe for us a typical disciplinary meeting?
it was just, it was really difficult. It was essentially they're just saying that I was wrong. Basically, they just kept saying, that they just kept coming up with these ideas about white privilege and privilege, and this is the view, and they were essentially saying uh, that while they understand that I might have found those ideas difficult, there was that highlighted a problem with my learning, and that essentially it was I was being defensive by not accepting these ideas, so I needed to I needed to go away and think about it and kind of learn more and educate myself. Essentially, that was the idea.
You must accept the truth of their position. That was the only line. Okay. So how did you go from internal complaints and disciplinary procedures to thinking, no, I actually need to take a stand on this legally? What was there a
Yeah.
point
So
that pushed you over that particular edge?
yeah, so it's the point after they raised the student conduct policy against me. They didn't follow any of their policies or procedures. They were supposed to meet with me. They were supposed to hear my side of the argument. They didn't do any of that. They just sent a letter to my house saying that I'd spoken inappropriately about race. They didn't quote what I'd said, but that if I continued to do so, I could be suspended from the course, and it may affect my ability to enter the profession. So at that point, I felt very much like that was after the first year, and I still had a whole another year, and I felt like I was totally being marked out. That all, if I just did one more thing, one more slip up there or something, not that I had slipped up, but if I just said they could use anything against me, and then I would be out. So that's when I started to think about serious legal action. I'd already been getting a little bit of legal advice, but not serious. But at that stage, we'd looked into the fact that essentially what they were saying was against the Equalities Act, and they were discriminating against me, and they were trying to hound me out of the course and the profession. And I felt like, yeah, everybody sort of felt like it looked like it could be a good case. And particularly with regards to critical race theory, I felt that this was really important because there hasn't been that much legal action against critical race theory in this country. So our government have made some noise about it and said that these ideas shouldn't be being taught as fact and so on, but they are being taught as fact, and it just carries on. So I was sort of feeling that I wanted to protect myself, my career, but also I thought actually this is quite an important thing to do more broadly.
Did you get any political support? Did you go and speak to MPs or anything about this?
I have done recently, so more that not when I was going through it, but more recently now that I've served court documents and I've had some press attention. I've met with my MP who was really supportive and had really looked at the case and um, yeah, he was really supportive, and we're trying to. We actually had recently Claire Fox spoke about the case in the House of Lords, so we're getting some attention politically, and we're hoping to do that, going forward as well. Obviously, legal cases take a lot of time, and it's a big endeavour. Yeah. But hopefully, as it goes along, and depending on the outcome, I'm hoping that it can get political attention. Yeah.
Where is the case now? I see your crowdfunder, when we reported on the story on Monday, so 3 days ago, it was at 99,000 and it's nearly 107,000. So out of 150,000 you're seeking to raise. So the crowdfunder is clearly going very well. Um, uh, where is the legal process at the moment?
The crowdfund's been amazing, and just thank you to everyone that's donated. If there's anyone listening, it's I've had to live with the sort of risk of the financial risk for a long time, and now I feel so much more relieved that I can actually afford what I'm doing. But in terms of the legal case, so we served court documents to them. We're now we agreed a stay, which is kind of when you put a pause on the legal case for them to prepare their defence. There's still back and forth negotiations going with my legal team and their legal team, so we haven't got their defence yet. Um, so we'll have to see. I don't want to say anything at this stage, but uh, yeah, we're looking to maybe get some expert witness testimony against some of these ideas, and we're I mean, we'll see how it develops, but yeah, I haven't had a costs hearing yet, so I'm going to have to see how much it will cost, but it is going to cost a lot, so it's amazing to have that if those donations are that's changed. That's a big game changer for me. So yeah, if anybody wants to see my crowdfund, I've got a video on my crowdfund which shows some of the things they've been saying, and it's GoFundMe Stand Up to Woke, and that's the campaign that I'm going to try to be sort of leading.
And as you've gone public with this and launched the legal case, and I'd have to say that given the nature of the events, founding your opposition to them around a legal case is a very strong decision. It's a very good decision because political support and public support can rally around a case, a court case, and it can provide a kind of central focus for a campaign, where otherwise it kind of lacks that objective. So I've seen that work in the past extremely well. Now that you've gone public, you've been discussed in the House of Lords, etc. What's the public response and indeed the press response been to you?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's mostly it's been really good. I mean, I was really preparing myself for a lot of backlash for this. I was sort of thinking this is gonna when I go public, I'm gonna get a lot of negative, I'm gonna get a lot of negative attention, and I was sort of thinking, I had to weigh that up in my mind. But actually, it's been mostly positive. I've had lots of health professionals contacting me saying, I feel the same way. I can't speak up. I'm so pleased that you have. I'm so pleased that you're taking this legal action. I've had people from all walks of life contacting me saying, really support you. I've had, and the press have largely been really helpful in helping me to get some publicity for it. So it's been amazing. And the fact that people are donating and writing to me as well, offering if there's anything that they could do to support me. It is very much a kind of silent majority that they all seem to say the same thing, that what you're saying is common sense, and um, you know I can't believe they're teaching these ideas, and we all need to stand up to this because we all feel scared to. So there is a lot of support out there.
The people in the medical profession who've written to you saying they're
Mm,
too scared to stand
yeah.
up. Um, the, um, do they explain why they're scared, how they became scared? Do they explain the pressures that they're seeing?
Yeah, so I've had some nurses and some doctors as well, and some trainee counselors and psychotherapists, and they sort of say, I got pulled into a diversity seminar, and I really didn't like some of the things they were saying, but I didn't want to, I felt like I was the only one, and I didn't want to, I didn't want to. I didn't want to have to go. I didn't want to have to make a big deal out of it. I didn't want the focus to be on me, so I didn't say anything. But I wish I had. Or some people have said, that maybe have raised it and they haven't had much of a kind of good experience of people responding back. So there's a lot of people that have said that they've had an issue with their employer where they've had made a complaint, but they didn't go any further than that. And they sort of say, what you're doing by taking legal action is the next step that I couldn't have done, but that's great that you're doing it. So there's a lot of people giving me examples of things that have happened to them where they've been shamed, where they've been ostracized, and they maybe even left the job and got a job elsewhere, just sort of, accepted it rather than doing anything about it, just because it is a huge thing to do. So, I can understand why they wouldn't, want to. But yeah, it is something that all people all across the country, and not just in the UK. I've had some people in other countries saying that we've got this here as well. We've got this in Australia. We've got it in New Zealand. So yeah.
And do you have any feel for how widespread this ideology is in the NHS? I mean, you've experienced this in one trust, in one course, in one trust. Is that an outlier? Is that typical? Is that simply one of the more extreme examples of a general problem? Do you have any feel for how much this has actually penetrated the NHS?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping it was an outlier, but I mean, I spoke to some psychologists recently, Kirsty Miller and Carol Sherwood, who've recently done a Freedom of Information Act, where they've looked at psychology training courses all across the UK, and they've found essentially that this what they call anti-racism, this critical race theory, is being taught all across the UK in terms of clinical psychology. At least I don't know about other disciplines, but I do see, as someone that works in the NHS, that the NHS does use this phrase anti-racism a lot. Sometimes, in it, it may be that people don't know what it means, and they're using it in a mild sense to mean, equality in a normal, in a kind of normal way. But it does keep coming up a lot, but yeah, definitely within the field of psychology, it seems that it's across the country. It's in lots of universities where people are being made to discuss this idea of whiteness and white privilege, and so on, and view different people as being oppressors or oppressed, and so on and so forth. And people, lots of people saying that they're not comfortable with that. And I mean, I was speaking to the psychologist that did the report, and they're explaining that it's fundamentally against the ethics of the profession, because we're taught to be non-judgmental and to create a neutral space, whereas the ideology encourages clinicians to be activists, essentially, which is not what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's really in contrast. It's a complete conflict, isn't it?
It is a
I mean, my experience of talking to people involved in essentially related fields of counselling and helping people with mental health and trauma. They are being judgmental and imposing their worldview on their clients is a complete anathema to them. I mean, that's like almost the greatest possible error. That's the thing they avoid utterly, and are quite explicit about how they avoid it and why they avoid it. You've gone to study this particular field, and you're being told that you must have this this particular ideology, and you must apply it. It's. I mean, I'm not shocked now, because we've seen quite a lot of this coming in. But the contrast between my engagement with that field, and I was a director of a charity delivering counselling services, mostly to people who were trauma affected, for a short while. But my experience of interacting with that field, which is only 3 or 4 years old, is the exact opposite of what you've just described. The culture is being transformed utterly. It's not simply a minor correction to the course. It's a complete 180 in terms of how they're viewing the role of the ideology of the organization and the ideology of the staff, and how that interacts with the people you're there to help. I am still quite astonished at the speed of the transformation in the profession that you're witnessing here. The speed and the totality of it, the whole profession, Tavistock and Portman anyway, seems to have been captured by this ideology. It seems to have jettisoned everything it ever believed in, and this is now all encompassing. This is now all absorbing. This is the new truth and the only truth. It's a stunning turnaround.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. Like you said, I've always been taught to be, you have to be aware of your own biases, and you're not coming. You shouldn't be coming in with an agenda. You shouldn't be telling the patient what you think they should do, or you shouldn't be putting your view onto them. And this totally goes against that. It just encourages. It's really toxic. It encourages negative thinking and shaming, and and kind of guilt tripping people and so on and so forth. These aren't things that you'd want to encourage in anyone really. So no, I totally agree. It's happened very quickly. I think possibly in the last, I think obviously I think these ideas have been around for a long time, but the speed at which it's infiltrated the NHS is maybe, I don't know, maybe in the last 5 years or so, and it's become increasingly worse in the last 2 or 3 years, something like that. That's my assessment of it anyway.
Yeah, yes, because I mean the ideas themselves you can trace back certainly to the 60s, quite possibly a good bit before that, and ultimately you can probably get the germination of the ideas back with German philosopher Hegel, back to Rousseau. You've got a whole lot of a series of the development of the ideas that stretch back at least a couple of 100 years. But
Mm-hmm.
in the modern form, we're talking ideas that are 50 to 75 years old, and they've been around there, and they've been in writing, and they never really got too much traction outside the extreme left.
Mm.
And then the Berlin Wall came down, and history was over. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, did we all take our eye off the ball? But this ideology suddenly seemed to be capturing institution after institution. It's the long march through the institutions, and but it's been not so much a march; it's more a sprint. The degree to which they've fallen, the speed, the rapidity of it is really striking. I've never seen such a cultural shift in such a short space of time. It's almost like it's again. This comes back to it's like a religion. The only thing that you could maybe hold up as being somewhat analogous would be something like the Reformation.
Mm-hmm.
The Reformation swept through Scotland, and literally mobs formed and went around and um, smashed stained glass windows and threw down statues, and they changed how the churches looked. They changed how the churches were practicing very, very quickly, where this sort of a firestorm of new ideas took hold. It's somewhat like that. It's got that kind of that speed and almost that in terms of the ideology, almost that level of violence. Because if you resist against it, you're attacked. You're not persuaded. No one's coming and saying, "Well, this is how we see it." I hope you'll think about what I said. No, it's an attack because you are problematic. You're toxic. Your words are traumatizing. It's all heightened into this kind of febrile, emotional, and very aggressive attack on anything that stands against the new ideology. This is the nature of it, and it's a strange thing to behold. To finish up, Amy, you're working through. You're still working in the NHS. You're a practicing nurse. You've got this hugely important case now commencing, and you're doing interviews in media and describing your case. It must have been a big transformation in your life, and not at all what you were expecting. How are you reacting to this? How are you feeling about this new challenge that's been placed in front of you that you didn't choose, but you're now picking up? How are you feeling about how this has affected your life and your view of your career and your future? What's it meant for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, lots of mixed feelings. I mean, it's been, of course, really nerve-wracking. It's been extremely stressful. I've had lots of sleepless nights. I mean, even being on media is something I'm getting used to. I was quite a private person before all this. I'm quite introverted in some ways, so I'm getting used to sort of being on camera and speaking and gaining confidence in just doing that. But it's been, I mean, I feel like in some ways, I feel really positive about it. I think it's very meaningful. I feel like it's important. So I feel quite focused and determined. But it has its down days. It's sometimes it just feels, I just feel absolutely exhausted with it, and I want to break from it. And um, yeah, so I kind of a bit of a roller coaster, ups and downs. Um, but the support that I've had has been amazing. So yeah.
Have you had support from the churches?
I've had a few people reach out to me. My church has been really helpful to me. I've had, yeah, but not. I've had a support from Christian Legal Centre. I've had some advice from them, and there's an organisation called Christian Concern. They've reached out to me, so I've had some Christian organisations reach out to me. Yeah.
But not the church as in um,
Mm.
the larger organisation. There's been no response, say, from the
No,
Church of England or anything like that. Okay.
no, no.
Okay. That's maybe another fight for another day. Um, Amy, look,
Indeed.
it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you very much for taking us through the story. We'll watch it carefully. We wish you every success in fighting for, well, the right to be able to think is essentially what you're fighting for. The right to be able to discuss, the right to be able to be professional, the right to be able to dissent. These are very important rights, and this is what you're fighting for, and it's a fight that we're fully behind, and we know only too well that you may be fighting it today, but you're fighting for hundreds and thousands of people who will be in similar positions all across the country. So we wish you every success, and thank you very much.